All right, so this is chapter 2C. We're going to be focusing on expanding algebraic expressions. I know I've already taught this in class, and I know some people are pretty comfortable with it, but just a couple of things I do want to add at the same time. Also, it's pretty much just for those who are not available just because they're unwell. So if they've missed a lesson, they can always just watch this video to pretty much catch up. So the goal here for this chapter is to use the distributive law. And this rule here pretty much just tells us how to expand brackets. Um, expand brackets by multiplying using a term outside the bracket. And this ties in with the first point. And the goal is to expand brackets first before collecting like terms when simplifying algebraic expressions. Okay, so let's just go through it now. All right, so this is the distributive law here. Okay, so basically, all you are doing is you are taking whatever is outside the bracket, and as you can see from the red lines, you are going to multiply the letter A in this case to the letter B in the first one. So that's what the red line is for. So you do A times B, and then you take the letter A, you multiply it with the C value there. So A times C. Now, there are different variations. It just depends on the sign that you're using or whatever's given. Now, one thing you need to watch out for is when you multiply a negative number inside. Okay, just remember the rules of multiplying stuff. So, if you have a look in the top right here, I've written it out already. So, if you have a positive number and it multiplies to another positive number, the result is just positive. If you have a negative multiplied with a negative together, that makes a positive, and vice versa. Positive and negative makes negative, and negative times positive equals negative. So the rule here pretty much is if you multiply two numbers where they are the same sign, it always ends up being positive. When you multiply two numbers or two terms, when they are different signs, for example, over here, so if I have, so in my third example, if I have a negative number and I multiply it with a positive number, I just end up with a negative and vice versa, okay? Now, I understand that what I've taught you so far is, let's say if I have this 2 bracket x plus 3, the way to do this is obviously through the distributive law, which is what I've taught you already. And what you will normally do is you can write it out separately if you wanted to. So 2 times x or positive x, and then you have 2 times 3. So that'll be 2x, and then 2 times 3 is just 6, yeah? Or plus 6 in this case. Now, ideally, this sign here that you have inside the bracket will just stay the same. So it'll be 2x plus 6. Now, the one time you do need to be careful is, let's say, my example was -2. That's outside the bracket. And then I'm left with this right here. Okay. So I'll do the same example. I just have a negative instead. So I'm going to write it out separately again. -2 times positive x. That gives me -2x. Now what you can do is just multiply the number 3 here as it is. Okay. So I'm going to take -2 times positive 3. Just like that. Now, this will just end up being -6. Now, when you put it back inside the expression here, what you'd normally end up with is -2x. Now, this plus here, I'm going to bring it back over here to plus, and then I'm going to write -6, just like that. Now, as you can see here, we don't like it when two signs are directly next to each other, so we need to combine them into one. So when you see a plus and a minus right next to each other like that, just remember the same rules as earlier from up here in the top right. Okay. the same rules still apply. They're different signs, so what you end up is a negative, but in this case, it will be a minus sign instead. So your final answer will just be 2, negative 2x minus 6. Now, if I wanted to follow the same pattern as this first one right here, all I had to do was just take negative 2 times x. So I'm taking the sign in front of what I plan on multiplying. So in this case, I have a plus x right there. So that will still be the same as negative 2x. And then I have here, actually, I'll use a different example. Let's try something else. Let's try negative 2x minus 3. Okay, so let's just be careful here. So I'm just going to show the distributive law like that. Write it out again. Negative 2 times positive x is just negative 2x. And then I have here negative 2 times 3, which just ends up being negative 6, yeah? Now, when I put it back all together, I'm going to end up with negative 2x. Now, keeping my original minus sign from the question here, I'm keeping it the same. And then I'm going to substitute this negative 6 in at the end. Now, as you can see here, two minus signs are right next to each other. It just combines together to make plus, okay? So that is technically the proper way of doing it. But the way I've taught you so far still works the same, okay? So don't stress about it too much. Now, if you have if you're confused about any of this, just come back to me and I'll explain it, okay? So over here, you got to be careful when the number or the term outside the bracket or in front of the bracket is negative, okay? You got to be careful. Be extra careful and be vigilant, okay? So, and the sign of each term changes when you start multiplying it, okay? So see for my example here, I have negative 2 on the outside and I'm multiplying with whatever's inside the bracket there. So I'm multiplying negative 2 with x and then negative 2 with the 3, okay? So in this case here, negative 2 times positive x just ends up with negative 2x. And then I have negative 2 multiplied that with negative 3 in this case, because I'm just taking the sign in front of whatever it is I'm multiplying it by. I end up with positive 6. And when I put that together, the final answer just ends up as negative 2x plus 6, just like that. Now, over here are some examples, okay? So I'll just go along. I'll sort of start this over again just to make sure it makes sense. Just give me one moment while I clean this up. So I am just going to apply the distributive law. So whatever's outside the bracket, I'm going to draw these little arches that point into whatever's inside the bracket. That will just indicate to me what I plan on multiplying uh, together, okay? So I have 3 times x, which is just 3x. Then the next thing I plan on doing is do 3 times 4. Now, as you can see here, this is a plus 4 right here. So if you wanted to play it extra safe, you can put like plus sign in front of it if you wanted to. I could not care. And then you can also put the plus sign in front of the 3, okay? And just remember the rules of multiplying. Just referring to our top right diagram here, when I multiply two positive numbers together, I just end up with a positive number, okay? So this will just equal to 12 or plus 12 in this case. Oh, apologies. Plus 12. The final step is to just put it together. So once you put it together, it will just become 3x plus 12. And that is all you have to do with the first one, okay? Now, I am just going to line this up and just draw a line across from it just to separate it. Now, let's just go through the second one, okay? So let's just draw the arrows inside. I'm left with 5 times a, which equals to 5a. And then I have 5 times -11. So just remember, I'm taking this minus sign with me as well when I am multiplying, okay? This will just end up being -55 because I am multiplying a positive number with a negative number, hence why it's negative. And then you just do 5 times 11, which is 55. Put them together, it'll just end up being 5a minus 55. Sorry, my handwriting. Okay, just like that. And that is your final answer. So let's just line this up. Oh, no, that's not right. Oh, that is not right at all. What is happening here? Now, the final one is going to be a bit tricky, so do pay attention. So because I don't have any room on top, I'm just going to draw the arrows underneath. So I have here -2 times positive c. As you can see here, the c is positive because there's no sign. There's no sign in front of the c. If there was a sign in front of the c, it would already mention that it's a negative number. Okay, it's a negative c. So in this case, I have 2 times c is just 2c. Just check the signage. I have a negative times a positive. This will now just become a negative. My final step is to have -2 times -5. Okay, so as you can see here, taking the sign of the -5 here, just counting that as negative. When you multiply two negatives together, it makes a positive. So remember, the same signage means positive. So this will be positive 10 in this case. Put it all together, it will just become -2c plus 10, and that is your final answer. Okay. Now over here is the activity. I'll let you try it out yourselves. So don't worry about it too much. Now, over here, okay, it's pretty straightforward. You are following the same rules as previously up here. The only difference is you have sort of multiple letters together. Now, for the first example here, it's pretty self-explanatory, as you can see in the explanation. It's the second one that I want you to be careful about, and I will explain that to you right here. Normally, what you're used to so far is just seeing the numbers being on the outside only. But over here in the second example, we have a term. We have an actual term here where it's got a coefficient and a variable. Okay. The same rules apply where you take the term outside the bracket and you multiply it to whatever is inside. Okay. So as you can see here, I have -2x times 4x. Now, you might be wondering what is going on. Okay. So just focus on the numbers first. So I have here -2 times 4. That just ends up being -8, correct? Now you're wondering, what do I do with the x's here? Now this refers back to last term where you learnt about index laws, yeah? Just think back, what happens when you multiply um, same bases, okay? When you multiply the same bases, it pretty much just adds the power. Now, over here in my original question here, I have here just x and x. Another way of writing this in index form is x to the power of 1 times x to the power of 1. And like I explained earlier, when you multiply these bases that are the same, which is x in this case, you're adding the powers together. So this will now just become x to the power of 1 plus 1, which equals to x squared. Okay. So you just put this in at the end. And the final step is what you do, whatever it is that you're doing after. So in this case, it is negative 2x times negative 3. And just focus on the numbers first. Negative 2 times negative 3 is positive 6. And then what you're left with is x at the end. So this is just plus 6x. Okay, that is all it is. Um, Now, over here is where it sort of gets a bit tricky. So whenever you plan on simplifying, okay, and whenever you're given a little expansion, like when you're given a distributive law within the question as well, your first step is to always expand the bracket. So as you can see here, I took this 3 here and I multiplied it to whatever was inside the bracket. Do that first, okay? And that is indicated by blue star or blue asterisk, okay? The second step is to collect like terms. So as you can see here, this 2 and this negative or this minus 12 here are like terms. They're pretty much constants, but you can actually just collect them together. So it's quite easy. You read it from left to right. 2 minus 12 is just negative 10. And then you just put that together. Hence why this is your final answer, 3x minus 10. Now, the second example is where it gets a bit tricky. So, like I explained earlier, always expand the brackets, okay? Expand it first. Now, you might be wondering what sort of goes on, but it's pretty simple. So as you can see here in my first bracket, this is what I got after expanding. So I have 3x plus 6y. Now, it's the second expansion that you have no idea what's going on. Okay? You're used to a number being in front, okay? It could be 2, 3, 4, whatever. Don't know what it is, yeah? Now, the rule is similar to algebra, yeah? Whenever you see the letter or the variable by itself, the supposed number in front is 1, correct? So that same rule applies here. So the imaginary number in front of the second bracket in order to expand is 1. In this case, it is negative 1 because there's a minus sign in front, okay? So you have to take that sign into account as well. Now, when you expand, as you can see, they've put a negative 1 here. They expanded it. Negative 1 times 3x is negative 3x. So I'll just write it down here. Negative 1 times 3x is negative 3x. And then I have negative 1 times positive y is just minus y or negative y. And then once you put them together, it looks like this. Negative 3x minus y. So what you're going to do at the end here is write minus 3x minus y, just like that. The next step is to collect any like terms, okay? So remember, collecting like terms is when you find the variable, okay, or like the variable combination is the exact same lettering and the exact same power. So as you can see here, I have x and x here. So those two work. Now, you got to be careful from this point on. So when you're collecting like terms, you sort of want to gather them up to all together. So you read it as 3x, positive 3x minus 3x. So you take this sign with you as well. It's minus 3, okay? It's not like you're just switching the terms with wherever you want. You have to take the sign with you as well. So once you take the sign with you, 3x minus 3x, it just becomes 0. It vanishes. So it pretty much disappears just like that. Now, the only thing you have left is 6y minus y. And just remember in algebra, if you don't see a number in front of the variable, the supposed number is the number 1. So what's 6 minus 1 then? 6 minus 1 is just 5y. Okay, that's all it is. That's all it is. So please refer back to the slides on Google Classroom. Okay. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know. Take care.